Snowfall in Maple Hollow was rarely gentle. It didn't drift down like a postcard. It slammed into the ground in thick, wet sheets, burying everything it touched. The Pinecrest Motel sat at the edge of the old highway like a forgotten relic. A long, low building with flickering neon and a parking lot that creaked under the weight of ice. That night, the storm swallowed it whole. And that was where my wife, Helen, chose to spend her evening. She told me she was meeting a friend for dinner in town. "A girls' night," she said with a dismissive wave, already halfway out the door. I didn't argue. I hadn't argued with her in months, maybe years. There were fights you learned you couldn't win, so you saved your breath and let the silence carry the weight. I didn't follow her. I didn't need to. People talk in small towns. Secrets here don't rot. They ferment. But none of that mattered when her car vanished. It happened around 11 p.m. Helen stepped out of her motel room, room 12, according to the receipt she would later pretend not to have, wrapped in her beige coat and frustration. She expected to find her silver SUV waiting for her, idling, warm. Instead, she found an empty indent in the snow. Just tracks, fresh, deep, leading into the tree line behind the motel where no road existed. She stood there for a long time, snow piling on her shoulders, her face pale beneath the parking lot lamp. Part anger, part fear, part calculation. Because Helen always calculated. When she finally called me, her voice trembled just enough to sound convincing, but not enough to fool a man who'd already buried his trust. "Ollie, I think my car was stolen." Ollie, not Oliver. She only used that name when she wanted something. I sat in my truck 3 miles away, engine humming, watching the storm twist the world into a sheet of white. "Call the sheriff," I said. I didn't offer to come. She noticed and hated it. 2 hours later, she walked through the front door of our house. Soaked, shaking, breathless. And there, on the driveway, sat her missing SUV. Clean, warm. Keys on the passenger seat, as if someone had gently placed them there. But the real punch waited inside. On the kitchen table, under the soft glow of the pendant light, I'd laid 2 items, her keys and her wedding ring. A simple arrangement, a quiet message. And when she crossed the threshold, her gaze locked onto them instantly. Fear flashed across her face. Real fear. Not because of the car. Not because of the storm. She knew what this meant. She knew I'd seen everything. She knew I wasn't pretending anymore. And that was the beginning. The drive home, 3 hours earlier, while she was still pacing in the snowstorm outside the Pinecrest Motel, I had been driving down County Road 17 with both hands tight on the steering wheel. Snow burst against the windshield like shards of broken glass, limiting the world to a tunnel of white and headlights. I should have been angry. That would have been normal, expected. But instead I felt a strange calm settling in, like a quiet before something irreversible. The kind of calm you get when you stop fighting a current and let it take you where it wants. I'd spent a decade trying to be the man Helen needed, or the man she claimed she needed. Provider, listener, protector, builder, furniture maker, husband. Somewhere along the way I became invisible. Not mistreated, not hated. Just unimportant. A fixture in my own home. But driving through that storm, I finally saw everything clearly. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to accuse. I wasn't going to beg. I was simply going to observe, let her unravel herself. By the time I pulled into the driveway, the light in the kitchen was already on. She wasn't home yet, but she would be soon. So I set the table. Keys, ring,
space, and then I sat down and waited. When she walked in, the door clicked, softly. Helen always closed doors softly, even when she was furious. She said slamming doors was what unstable people did. I wondered if she still believed that. She stopped when she saw the table, stopped breathing, stopped blinking, stopped pretending. Her lips parted. Shock, hope, fear, all fighting for space on her face. She stepped closer, her boot prints forming puddles on the hardwood. "Oliver," she whispered. I didn't respond. I'd practiced my line all the way home, but when the moment came, I didn't need theatrics. I didn't need explanations or accusations. I just said 2 quiet words. "I know." That was it. Her body folded, knees bending slightly as if her bones had softened. She grabbed the side of the table to steady herself. For the first time in years, she looked small to me. And real. But I didn't stay to watch her break. I turned, walked past her, and went down the hallway toward my workshop, the one room in our house where the truth had always lived. Behind me, she exhaled shakily, the sound of a person finally cornered. A sound like surrender. The workshop. My workshop wasn't fancy. A converted garage with cedar shelves, a lathe, sanders, and half-finished projects scattered like bones. But it was mine. Everything in that room obeyed me, relied on me, trusted my hands. Unlike Helen, the silence in the shop was heavy, like an old friend that had been waiting for me to return. I leaned against the workbench, letting the hum of the storm outside seep into my bones. My mind drifted. Back to the days when Helen and I first met, when she still laughed with her whole face and held my hand like I mattered. Before the promotions, before the new friends who looked at me like I was a stray dog she'd taken in, before the long nights at her office, before the password changes, before the emotional drift, before I became furniture. It was almost funny. I built tables, chairs, beds, things meant to hold weight, to last years, decades even. Yet I hadn't noticed how my own marriage quietly decayed under the finish. I wasn't angry now, I was just done, and she knew it. I heard her footsteps in the hallway twice, hesitant, stopping at the door each time. She didn't knock. Maybe she didn't know what to say. Maybe she knew nothing she could say would matter. Good. Let the silence do the work I no longer cared to do. The next morning I slept in the guest room. Not out of spite, just logistics. The master bedroom felt like a stage, and I was done performing. At 7:15 a.m., Helen knocked lightly. "Oliver, can we talk?" Her voice cracked on the last word. I opened the door. She stood there with swollen eyes and trembling hands. No makeup, no shield. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately. "It was a mistake, I swear. A stupid, meaningless—" I raised my hand. "Please don't." She blinked, confused. "I'm not interested in the rehearsed version," I said. "Not today." Tears formed, but she forced them back. Helen never cried unless she believed it would change something, and she wasn't sure it would. "I'll get us a counselor," she said quickly. "A psychologist. Whatever you need. We'll fix this, Oliver. We can fix this, please." I nodded slowly. "Okay." Her breath caught, hope flaring bright. "But we do it my way," I added. She hesitated. "Your way. Yes, full honesty, full access. No secrets." She swallowed hard. "Of course," she whispered. She was lying. Already. And she didn't even realize I could see it. The peace wouldn't last long. Not with what was coming next. Observing Helen, Over the next few days, I watched her the way a craftsman examines a flawed piece of wood, not judging, just understanding where the weak spots were. Her phone never left her hand. Her smiles were too wide. Her apologies were too scripted. Her touch was too cautious. Her eyes darted too fast from object to object, like she was scanning for danger. I'd learned something valuable in woodworking. Light reveals lies.
You shine it from the right angle, and the truth stands out, whether the wood wants it to or not. So I shined the light, and she cracked. The emails. It happened on a Wednesday night. She had gone to the gym, something she suddenly resumed after 4 months of being too tired. I sat at her computer, stared at the login screen, and shook my head. Same password as always. Helen was brilliant at deception, terrible at security. When her inbox opened, the truth spilled out like an overflowing drawer. Dozens of emails, some new, some archived, some labeled under work projects, some disguised as receipts, conversations with him, plans, stories, excuses, jokes about me, financial documents she thought I'd never see, requests for just a little more time, a promise she made 2 weeks ago. I'll have the money by the 12th. He won't notice a thing. I sat back, stared, felt nothing at all. It hadn't been an accident, not a moment of weakness, not a one-time mistake. It was a plan, calculated, organized, almost elegant in its cruelty. I closed the laptop. Then I turned off the lights and sat alone in the dark, listening to the house breathe around me, wondering how long my life had been a performance for someone who never intended to stay. When Helen finally walked in that night, hair damp from the gym shower, cheeks flushed, she smiled nervously. "Hey," she said, too casual. "I was thinking we could—" I turned the laptop screen toward her. She froze. Helen didn't blink when she saw the laptop. Not at first. She just stood in the doorway, gym bag still hanging off her shoulder, the smell of cheap dryer sheets drifting off her sweatshirt. Her eyes locked onto the screen as if the light itself had nailed her to the floor. When she finally inhaled, it was sharp, like someone had just pushed her underwater. "Oliver, I can explain." She always said that, and she always believed it. I kept the room dim. The small lamp on the workbench lit the space in soft amber, throwing long shadows behind her. Everything in that workshop had a place. Every chisel returned to its slot. Every screw organized by size. The room didn't tolerate chaos, but Helen brought it with her anyway. "Explain what?" I asked calmly. Too calmly. I could see that realization land in her expression. The chill that told her I wasn't operating on my usual wavelength. She stepped forward, mouth opening and closing as if testing different lies on her tongue. "It's not what it looks like," she tried. I didn't laugh. I didn't even blink. "It's exactly what it looks like," I said. "We both know that." Her face fell apart then. Not in tears, not yet, but in fear. Real fear. The kind you can't fake because it comes from deep, instinctual knowledge. Your audience has stopped believing your act. She looked at the screen again, at the emails, the promises, the plans, the financial threads she thought she'd buried in PDFs and project proposal folders. "How long?" she whispered. "Long enough." Her knees wobbled. She dropped the gym bag and leaned on the nearest work table, her palm landing inches from a half-finished walnut chair leg. She stared at it as if she expected it to splinter under her touch. But nothing in my workshop broke that easily. Except her. This wasn't supposed to happen.
Helen pressed both hands to her face, fingers trembling. I saw the truth flicker across her, the realization that all her rotating excuses, polished smiles, and carefully staggered explanations were worthless now. "Oliver, listen to me," she said, dragging her hands down slowly. "I didn't mean for this to get so far." "So far as what?" I asked. "Emails, nights at the Pinecrest, financial involvement." Her eyes widened. "You saw everything?" "Yes." Her lips parted. "Even the transfer receipts?" "Yes." She swallowed. Hard. I watched her throat tighten around it, like it was burning. "I was going to stop," she whispered. "I swear I was going to end it." I tilted my head. "And what?" She froze again, because she didn't know which lie to abandon first. The affair, the money, the plans with him, the part where she told him I was oblivious and easy to manipulate. Her silence was the confession. "It wasn't supposed to go this way," she said, voice cracking. "You weren't supposed to notice?" I finished. Her eyes filled with something between shame and anger. "No," she said quietly. "You weren't supposed to stop loving me." That surprised me, but not enough to matter. The tears she saved for last Helen broke then. Not gracefully, not dramatically. She collapsed inward, shoulders curling, hands clutching her shirt, breath shuddering out of her in shallow gasps. She dropped to the shop stool, elbows on her knees, and stared at the floor, like all the answers she wanted were hidden in the sawdust. "Why didn't you say anything?" she whispered. "Why didn't you fight for us? Aren't you supposed to fight?" "I did," I said. "For years." She covered her mouth. Tears finally spilled onto her cheeks, but they weren't the manipulative ones. I'd seen those often enough to recognize them. These were heavier, thicker, maybe even real. "I don't know who I am anymore," she said. "I didn't mean to hurt you. I felt lost, invisible." The irony twisted, bitter, in my chest. Invisible. The woman who made me feel like a piece of background furniture now claimed she had been invisible. "I needed something that made me feel alive," she said, voice trembling. "And don't," I snapped, not loud, not sharp, just final. "Do not say his name in my workshop." She nodded immediately, as if afraid the air between us might shatter. "He was a mistake," she whispered. "I see that now." I leaned back against the workbench. My hands were steady, my pulse slow. "You planned a future with him," I said. No, that's not—" "You promised him money." Her breath hitched. "You told him you'd leave by the end of the month." She closed her eyes. "You told him I'd adapt, because I always do." Her shoulders shook. "You lied to him too," I added. That made her look up, startled. "You told him I didn't love you anymore." She opened her mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Words slipped away from her, like she was trying to chase smoke. "Ollie," she whispered. The old nickname again, desperate, trembling. "I didn't mean—" "But you did say it." Her face crumpled. "And you said it because you believed it." She shook her head violently. Wet hair stuck to her cheek. No, I still love you." I raised an eyebrow. "Do you?" "Yes," she cried. "God, Oliver, yes, I messed up, but I never stopped." "You just wanted something more exciting." "I wanted something different," she corrected softly. "Not better." That distinction was worse somehow. The moment I realized she still didn't understand, her breathing slowed. Her tears softened. The panic faded. And then she did something that told me she still didn't understand the gravity
of what she'd done. She reached for my hand, instinctively, naturally, like she still had the right. I stepped back. Helen froze mid-motion, fingers hanging in the air like broken branches. She pulled her hand to her chest, eyes widening in a new kind of fear, the fear of being unwanted. "Oliver," she whispered, "please don't give up on me, please." I watched her, and in that moment I felt nothing. No love, no hate, no rage, no pity, just clarity. The kind carpenters learn after years of sanding. When you see the exact point, the grain changes direction. "We'll go to counseling," I said. As I promised, she nodded vigorously, "and we will talk through everything." "Yes," she said, breath shaking with relief. "We will. I'll do whatever it takes." "But," I added, "you need to know something first." She held still, quiet, tense, waiting.
"I'm not coming to those sessions to save our marriage." Her face lost all color. "I'm going," I continued, "to say everything I never said. After that, I'm deciding whether there's anything left to save." She opened her mouth, then stopped, closed it slowly, and nodded. Not in agreement. In surrender. The first session. The counselor's office smelled like eucalyptus and old rugs. Dr. Merwin was calm in the way people become calm only after 30 years of listening to broken couples argue over mismatched socks. He welcomed us with practiced warmth. Helen sat close to me, too close, as if proximity alone could patch the void. I didn't move away, but I didn't lean toward her either. The doctor folded his hands. "So," he said gently, "who wants to start?" Helen's grip tightened on her knee. She inhaled, prepared her script. But I spoke first. "I'm here," I said, "because I want to know why she didn't leave when she stopped loving me." Helen flinched. The doctor nodded slowly. "That's a fair question," he said. Helen's eyes filled instantly. "I never stopped loving you." I looked at her. Really looked. "You did," I replied softly. "You just didn't notice." Dr. Merwin cleared his throat. "Helen, what do you feel when Oliver says that?" She twisted her fingers, like he's twisting a knife. I shook my head. "I'm not twisting anything. I'm describing what I lived." She wiped her cheek. "I know, and I hate myself for it." "Do you?" I asked. "Or do you just hate that you got caught?" Her breath stopped. Dr. Merwin watched carefully. I don't know," Helen whispered. "Maybe both. Maybe neither. I feel like I've been living someone else's life." "You chose that life," I said. "Every step." She nodded slowly, no argument left in her. "So what do you need from me?" I asked. "Clarity? Forgiveness? Permission to stop pretending?" The room went quiet. Dr. Merwin leaned forward. "Oliver, what do you want?" I exhaled. And for the first time in months, I knew the answer. "I want my life back." Helen covered her mouth with her hand as if he'd slapped her. The drive home. Neither of us spoke for 20 minutes. Wipers scraped the windshield. Snow tapped the hood like fingers. The heater smelled faintly of dust. Helen finally broke. "Do you really want to leave me?" she whispered. "I don't know yet." She looked out the window. "I'm terrified you're going to walk away the moment I close my eyes." "I might." She curled inward, small, fragile, like a woman learning the cost of her own choices. "Oliver," her voice was barely audible, "can I fix this? You can try. Will you let me? I'll let you talk." She nodded, tears slipping silently down her cheeks. "That's all I can ask right now." But it wasn't. She wanted everything, and I had nothing left to give. The second revelation. 2 days later, the final crack appeared. It started with a text. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She was upstairs showering. Old Helen would have snatched the phone instantly, typing back with lightning-fast thumbs and a rehearsed smile. But new Helen kept it on silent, as if she wanted to prove she had nothing to hide. Except she did. The message preview showed only 3 words. Is it done? My pulse didn't spike. I didn't gasp. I didn't even frown. I just unlocked the phone. Same passcode, same misplaced confidence. When the thread opened, cold, simple sentences greeted me. Him. Did you talk to him? Him. We need the transfer before Friday. Him. Helen, answer me. Then, the most important one. Him. Is he still clueless? I stared at the words. Let them settle. Let them burn. Upstairs, I heard the shower turn off. Water. Footsteps. A soft hum she used when she was nervous. I put the phone back exactly where it had been and waited. When Helen walked into the kitchen, hair dripping, wrapped in a towel, she smiled timidly. Coffee? She asked. Sure. She brewed it, poured it, set the mug in front of me with shaking hands. And then she saw her phone screen.
Her eyes widened, face drained, lips parted in a tiny, horrified breath. She looked at me. I didn't blink. Finally, she whispered, Oliver, please listen. I leaned forward, planting my elbows on the table. I'm listening. Her hands shook violently. He lied to me, she said, voice cracking. He said he needed the money to... I raised one finger. Stop. She froze. Don't insult both of us, I said. Not today. Tears spilled instantly. I panicked, she said. I didn't know what to do. I didn't want to tell you because I knew it was over. It is, I said quietly. She collapsed into the chair across from me, burying her face in her hands. I'll fix it, she sobbed. I'll fix everything, I swear. Maybe, I said, but not for us. She looked up sharply. What do you mean? I pushed my chair back and stood. I'm not leaving yet, I said. We'll finish counseling, as promised. But you need to understand something now. Helen trembled visibly. I leaned in close. I am no longer trying to save this marriage. I am observing how it ends. Her breath broke. Her tears doubled. Her world collapsed. But mine? Mine finally made sense. Thursday evening settled over the house like a heavy storm cloud. Too quiet. Not peaceful quiet. A suffocating quiet. The kind that makes every thought sharper, heavier, louder. Michael sat in his study with the door closed, the documents Marcus had sent him spread across the desk. He read them for the 3rd time, though every line was burned into memory. The secret account, the transfers, the dates, the pattern, each one a blade. A blade confirming that his marriage had died long before he said the words, "We finalized the divorce on Friday." Emily didn't come upstairs until an hour after she returned home. She knocked softly, too softly, as if he were a headmaster, and she a student caught cheating on an exam. "Michael, can you open the door?" Her voice trembled. He opened it without a word and returned to his chair, deliberately not offering her a seat. She stepped inside anyway, her shoulders drawn tight, hands clasped so hard her knuckles turned white. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice thin. "Friday's coming faster than you think," he said coldly. "So talk quickly." Her lip quivered. She edged closer. I made mistakes," she began. He laughed under his breath, a humorless, bitter sound. "Mistakes? That word doesn't even scratch the surface." Tears pooled in her eyes. "I don't want you to leave me, Michael," she whispered. "I was stupid. I was lonely.
I thought, you thought, he snapped. You thought you could come home to me like everything was normal, while motel receipts and bank statements told me the real story? She flinched as if he'd slapped her. I tried to stop. I swear. I thought it would end. But it didn't, he cut her off. Because you didn't want it to. You wanted both, me and him. No consequences. No accountability. Her breath hitched, shaky and uneven. She took another step toward him, reaching out as if to touch his hand. He pulled it away, like her fingers were fire. Michael, I love you, she whispered. You're all I have. No, Emily. His voice was iron. You had someone else. For months. And you chose him every single time. She covered her face, muffling a sob. I thought you would never find out, she choked out. He laughed again, quiet, cold, like he'd just heard a joke with a cruel punchline. There it is. Finally. Honesty. He stood, approaching her slowly. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. But it carried the weight of judgment. You were counting on me being blind, being comfortable, being silent. He leaned a fraction closer. But the version of me you depended on died the moment I learned the truth. Emily straightened, trying to compose herself. Michael, I want to fix this. I can change. I'll do anything. Just tell me. No. The word cut cleanly. There's nothing left to fix. Only something to finish. Her shoulders collapsed. And that's why, he continued, stepping toward the doorway, tomorrow we finalize everything. Legally. Officially. He turned to her, his expression unreadable. And you'll be free to continue your meetings, without secrecy. Her voice cracked. Are you really leaving me? No, he said. You're leaving. He opened the door, silently asking her to walk through it. Emily didn't move at first. Her feet seemed rooted to the floor, but the look in Michael's eyes eventually forced her legs to obey. One step, then another, then another. At the threshold, she whispered, Michael, please, I want to be with you. He turned away, signaling the conversation was over. When the door finally clicked shut behind her, he let himself do something he hadn't done in months. He exhaled, deeply, but that breath held no regret, only clarity, resolve, and something else, the unmistakable understanding that tomorrow wasn't the end. It was the beginning of his freedom. Friday morning arrived quietly, almost deceptively calm, the kind of morning that pretends it's ordinary. But Michael felt the tension in the air the moment he woke up. A different silence. A silence with weight, with edges. Emily was already in the kitchen, sitting at the table with untouched coffee in front of her. She had clearly been awake for hours. Her eyes were swollen from crying, her mascara faintly smudged. Signs she had tried to clean her face more than once. She looked up as he entered, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael, can we talk before we go? He poured himself coffee slowly, deliberately. Every second of silence made her more anxious, more unsteady. Finally, he sat across from her. You have 5 minutes, he said. She swallowed hard. I didn't sleep, she murmured. I kept thinking about us, about what we had, about everything we built together. I didn't want to lose that. I didn't want to hurt you. He leaned back, expression unreadable. You did hurt me, he said calmly. Repeatedly. Her eyes filled again, but she blinked the tears away. I know, and I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but... He interrupted her softly. Emily, we're past forgiveness. She froze, breath catching. He continued,
voice even but sharp as a scalpel. Today isn't about your feelings. It's not about reconciliation or guilt. It's about closure, legal closure. Her hands trembled, fingers twisting around each other. "I'm scared," she whispered. "You should be." She flinched, startled by how effortlessly he said it. Because he meant it. Not as a threat, as a truth. After everything she'd hidden, all the lies, all the nights away. She had finally realized what she'd taken for granted. Michael had limits. She crossed them, and now the consequences were unavoidable. The drive to the attorney's office was painfully quiet. The only sound was her shaky breathing and the occasional click of the turn signal. Emily kept glancing at him, hoping for a softening, a moment of mercy, a sign that he might still change his mind. But his face stayed calm, focused, determined. When they arrived, Marcus was already waiting inside with a thick stack of documents, and a tone that suggested he had walked couples through this scenario many times, but rarely with stakes like these. They sat on opposite sides of a long, polished table, divorce papers spread between them like a battlefield map. Marcus cleared his throat. "Michael, Emily, as we discussed, today is the formal signing. Once completed, the agreement is binding. If either of you has final concerns, this is the time." Emily's voice cracked as she leaned forward. "I have concerns," she whispered. Marcus nodded. "Go ahead." She looked at Michael, pleading, desperate. "Michael, is this really what you want? After everything? After all our years together? Are you truly ready to let go of us?" His answer was calm, steady. "I let go the moment you did," he said quietly. "But you didn't tell me. You just kept pretending." A single tear slid down her cheek. "I was weak," she whispered. "No," he corrected. "You were dishonest." She closed her eyes like the words physically hit her. He signed his name. One stroke. Clean. Final. Emily stared at the pen in front of her. Her hand hovered above it, trembling. "Michael, I love you," she whispered. "I never stopped loving you." He didn't respond. So she signed. Slowly. Painfully. As if each letter carved something out of her. When she finished, she sank back in her chair, defeated, shaken, and pale. Marcus gathered the papers and stood. "The divorce is finalized," he said. "Effective immediately." Emily didn't speak. She couldn't. Her world seemed to collapse inward, silently, like a building imploding in slow motion. When they stepped outside, the sunlight hit her face, revealing how devastated she truly was. "Michael," she said softly, "is it really over?" He looked at her, truly looked, one last time. Yes, just one word. But it closed every remaining door. She swayed slightly, like her knees almost buckled. For the first time, she understood the magnitude of what she'd lost. Not her marriage, not her comfort. Him, his loyalty, his patience, his quiet devotion. Michael turned away, walked toward his car, and opened the door. Behind him, Emily's voice cracked through the parking lot. "Michael, please don't leave me alone." He paused just long enough to say, "You left me long before today." Then he got into the car, closed the door, and drove away, leaving her standing there, small and shaking, with the realization that her final weapon, guilt, no longer worked. And that was the beginning of her downfall, and the beginning of his new life. Emily stayed frozen in the parking lot long after Michael's car disappeared. People passed by, glancing at her, some curious, some concerned. But she stood motionless, hands hanging at her sides, her face pale with shock. She had imagined many outcomes. She had prepared speeches, apologies, defenses.
She had rehearsed tears, practiced remorse, but she hadn't prepared for this, for his indifference, for the clean, effortless finality of it, for the realization that Michael had truly let her go. It was almost sunset when she finally forced herself to move. She walked to her own car on unsteady legs, gripping the door handle so tightly her knuckles whitened. The moment she sat down, the mask cracked. She sobbed. Loud, raw, uncontrollable. Not because she'd lost a marriage, but because she'd lost the man who never would have given up on her until she gave him no choice. Michael didn't cry. Not once. Instead, he drove in silence, the road stretching before him like a promise. He didn't feel relief or triumph or vengeance. Just space. Space he hadn't felt in years. Space to breathe, to rebuild, to exist without lies shadowing every corner of his home. He checked into a temporary apartment he had already arranged. Something modest, clean, quiet. The kind of place where the furniture didn't hold memories. After setting down his keys, he exhaled deeply, as though releasing a weight that had been crushing him for months. He stood in the center of the small living room, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the air conditioner switching on, the city outside. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel oppressive. It felt honest. Emily, meanwhile, returned to an empty house. Her steps echoed in the hallway. The photos on the walls, vacations, anniversaries, birthdays, felt like accusations. Every room whispered what she had destroyed. She wandered through the house in a daze. His shirts were gone, his books, his laptop, his toothbrush. Traces of him had vanished, as cleanly as a signature. She collapsed on the bed they once shared and grabbed a pillow, hugging it to her chest as if it could somehow anchor her back to him. "Michael, please," she whispered, her voice cracked and trembling. "Come back, please." But he wasn't coming back. And deep down, she knew why. Days passed. Emily tried calling him, texting him, emailing him. Sometimes messages full of pleas and apologies. Sometimes messages full of anger. Sometimes messages begging for just one conversation. He never responded. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. He had given her every chance, more than a man should. She had answered those chances with deception. Now silence was the only language he had left. Michael focused on rebuilding. His job became a refuge, familiar, structured, predictable. His co-workers noticed a change in him. He was lighter, sharper, more focused. Some called it a glow-up. Some whispered he looked freer. And he was. Divorce wasn't freedom, he knew. But truth was, he attended the therapy sessions the judge recommended. Not for the marriage, those were already behind him, but for himself. To understand why he'd stayed through so much. To understand what he wanted moving forward. The therapist, Dr. Hayes, was a calm man with a quiet office and a gentle way of challenging excuses. After the second session, he said, "Michael, you weren't trying to save your marriage. You were trying to save the version of her you fell in love with." Michael had no argument. Because it was true. Emily attended the same sessions, required by the court, but her progress was different. She talked about regret, about fear, about the night she realized Michael didn't need her anymore. "There was always a safety net," she confessed. "He always forgave me. He always cared. I thought, no matter what I did, Michael would be there." The therapist tilted his head. "And what do you feel now that he isn't?" Emily didn't answer. She just started crying. because there was no answer. Months passed. Michael signed a lease for a new apartment, a bright place with tall windows, modern furniture, and sunlight that filled every room in the mornings. He bought new dishes, new blankets, new everything. He was building a life that didn't include her. Emily, on the other hand, was unraveling. Friends stopped visiting. Todd never reached out. Her co-workers whispered behind her back. Even her family grew tired of hearing her regrets. She had thought Michael would be the one suffering. But he wasn't. She was. Because she finally understood what loyalty meant only after she shattered it. 2 years later, they met again, unexpectedly, in a grocery store. Michael looked good, confident, healthier, stronger. A woman stood beside him, laughing softly at something he said. Someone warm, genuine, and clearly close to him. Emily froze. He noticed her. He gave her a polite nod. Nothing more. And that was what broke her. Not anger, not resentment, indifference. The realization that the man she betrayed had healed, moved on, and built a life where she no longer existed. She stood there holding her basket, unable to breathe, watching as he continued down the aisle with someone who had everything she had thrown away. And for the rest of her life, Emily would remember that moment, the day she realized she didn't lose her husband. She lost the last person who ever truly loved her. Emily didn't follow Michael down the aisle that day. She just stood there, rooted to the tile floor, clutching a basket of groceries that suddenly felt unbearably heavy. Her throat tightened, her vision blurred, and the world around her shrank into a tunnel. She watched him laugh with the woman beside him, watched the ease of his posture, the relaxed way he carried himself, the peace he had found without her. A kind of peace she had never given him. When he disappeared around the corner, Emily finally exhaled, a broken, trembling sound that made an elderly woman beside her glance over with concern. Emily forced a smile, pretended she was fine, pretended she wasn't shattering internally. But she was. She walked home in silence. The day was beautiful, crisp, bright, almost warm, but she felt none of it. Every step felt like walking through dense fog. When she finally reached her small apartment, the one-bedroom place she'd moved into after the divorce, she dropped her keys on the kitchen counter and leaned against the wall, breathing hard. The apartment was spotless, organized, almost sterile. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a waiting room, a place she existed in, but never belonged to. She slid to the floor, hugging her knees, and finally allowed herself to whisper the words she had been avoiding for 2 years. He really doesn't love me anymore. And the truth stabbed deeper than any betrayal she had committed. Because Michael had always been the constant, the one person who never walked away, the one person who still cared even when she didn't deserve it. And now he had something she could never reclaim, a life without her. Michael didn't think about Emily again that day. He didn't analyze her expression or wonder what she felt. He didn't replay the moment in his mind. He simply went home with Sophia, the woman from the grocery store, cooked dinner with her, and talked about his plans for the next few months. Sophia wasn't flashy or dramatic. She wasn't an escape. She wasn't a replacement. She was peace. She was someone who arrived in his life when he was no longer broken. That night, after they finished dinner, she pulled him into a soft, quiet embrace. "I'm proud of you," she whispered, "for everything you've rebuilt." He didn't respond with words. He just held her tighter, because he finally understood something Emily never taught him. Love shouldn't feel like labor. It shouldn't feel like begging or bargaining or enduring. It should feel like this: effortless, calming, mutual.
And for the first time in years, Michael allowed himself to imagine a future again. Not one he clung to out of fear, but one he wanted. A future he was finally free to choose. Emily didn't sleep that night. She wandered through her apartment, touching the edges of the furniture, running her palms over picture frames, opening drawers just to close them again. She wasn't looking for anything. She was looking for absence. The absence of the life she once had. The absence of the man she didn't appreciate until it was too late. The absence of the future she threw away for a fantasy that dissolved like smoke. Around 3 a.m, she found herself in the closet, sitting on the floor with one of Michael's old shirts, the only thing she kept. She held it to her face, inhaling the faint scent that still clung to the fabric after all this time. And she cried in silence. Not dramatically, not loudly, just small broken sobs that shook her shoulders, because she finally understood the truth. She hadn't just destroyed a marriage. She had destroyed the one person who truly saw her. The worst part wasn't losing him. The worst part was knowing he had healed from losing her. Several months later, a letter arrived in Emily's mailbox. It was plain, without a return address. For a moment, her heart raced. A foolish part of her hoped, prayed, that it was from Michael. But when she opened it, the truth hit like frost. It wasn't a message of reconciliation, not an apology, not a farewell. It was a legal notice, a request to remove his name from several joint records that she had forgotten to close. His signature was at the bottom. Nothing more. No message, no warmth, no personal note, just business. Cold. Final. She stared at the paper for a long time, and then she signed it. Her signature was shaky. That signature was the moment Emily finally accepted reality. She wasn't part of Michael's life, not even as a memory. Michael never saw the signed papers. His lawyer handled everything. Instead, on the day the documents arrived back at his office, Michael was out to dinner with Sophia. They laughed, shared dessert, talked about a trip they planned to take. He didn't feel haunted. He didn't feel guilty. He didn't feel the weight of the past. He was living, and this time, he was living for himself. Months later, Emily heard a rumor through a coworker who heard from someone else in town. Michael was getting engaged. She dropped her coffee cup. It shattered on the floor, splashing hot liquid everywhere. She stood there trembling, the room spinning around her, her heartbeat pounding in her ears. She whispered only one sentence: "Good. He deserves good." And for the first time, her tears weren't about loss. They were about regret. Regret that she hadn't been the person he deserved. Regret that she had thrown away the kind of man women prayed for. Regret that she ruined the one story in her life that could have ended differently. But stories don't rewind, and life doesn't bend for second chances. Emily lived with that reality every day. She rebuilt herself, slowly, painfully. But the bruise of losing Michael never truly faded. It became a quiet ache, a shadow, a reminder. As for Michael, he married Sophia in a small ceremony by the water. No drama, no ghosts, no apologies lingering between them. Just two people choosing each other with clear eyes and steady hearts. When he exchanged vows, he didn't think of Emily at all, not out of cruelty, but because she no longer occupied the place in him where love once lived. He had forgiven her, not for her sake, but for his. And forgiveness was the final severing. The story ends with two truths. He healed. She remembered. He walked forward. She looked back. And that difference became the defining line of their lives. Michael closed the chapter. Emily lived in its shadow.